welcome to this Sunday service of the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Durham, North Carolina. My name is Reverend Jacqueline Brett, and whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever your race, your gender, whomever you love, and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we welcome you. If you're new to this community, and especially if you're visiting with us today, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat box. You'll also find a link there that will help you to learn more about us. We also invite you to attend today's Inquirers class for visitors and newcomers, which occurs at noontime on Zoom. And directly after this service at 11:30, everyone is invited to the virtual coffee hour. Information on how to get to both these events will appear on your screen and in the chat box at the end of the service. You can also access them from the homepage of our website at ERUUF.org. Today's worship team includes myself, Reverend Deborah Cayer, and David Huber. Our music this morning is provided by Kate Lewis on piano, and Pam Delavorde is our cantor. Today's tech team is Sean Trimble and Jenny Jolly. So I invite us all now to center ourselves, and let us all together take a deep breath in and let it out. We continue now with the prelude, Insurrection Blues by Kate Lewis. Wow. Our opening words this morning are from The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice.
And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man.
And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but to what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious.
Victorious. We light our chalice for the bright new morning of our country. This small light echoing the light of our vision of equity and justice that surely rises just as the sun. May the light of our faith show us the way into that bright future and inspire us always to carry our love and our commitment as we move forward together. We're going to sing together. We have the chance to sing together. Pam will lead us in Bright Morning Stars. The words will appear on your screen.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Day is all breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Days are breaking in my soul. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. Days are breaking in my soul. Oh,
I'm happy to be here this morning with David Huber. David has our next reading for us. David is a leader at ERUUF. He's been a leader for just since the minute he got here. He just can't help being a leader. He's awesome. He's a member of our multicultural team, and he's led classes and groups for that. He's a leader of the White Awareness Group, and he's also on our change team. Just so grateful for you being here this morning, David. And he is reading for us an article, slightly edited article by David Zucchino. David Zucchino is a journalist and an author. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, actually. And last year, David published a book called Wilmington's Lie. And it's just such an important book for our time. And David wished he could have been here to be with us this morning. David Zucchino wished he could have been here with us. He's actually an ERUUF member. But he was unable to be here, but he was very glad that we could use this recent article that he's written, and really glad that David Huber is here to read it. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Deb. I just want to say it's a big honor to be asked to read this today, so thank you. And I'm very grateful to be here to speak with all of you and to share this reading with you. The title of the article is American Legacy, When White Supremacist Mobs Threaten Democracy, by David Zucchino. The mob of Trump supporters and white nationalists who assaulted the Capitol last week were not the first armed insurrectionists to storm an American seat of government, incited by an authoritarian politician spouting conspiracy theories. In 1898, heavily armed white supremacists besieged City Hall in the port city of Wilmington, North Carolina, overthrowing a multiracial government after shooting dead at least 60 Black men. They were incited by white demagogues determined to eliminate, quote, Negro rule and, quote, Negro domination, and restore white supremacy. Both insurrections were fanned by carefully orchestrated campaigns of lies and disinformation, what President-elect Joe Biden has called, quote, the big lie, perpetrated by President Trump and his enablers in Congress and right-wing media. For weeks, the Capitol rioters were fed false claims that the 2020 election had been stolen, ultimately igniting a siege of the Capitol to stop the steal of the Electoral College vote certifying Biden's victory. Biden has called the mob, quote, a bunch of thugs, insurrectionists, white supremacists, anti-Semites, unquote, who enjoyed, quote, the active encouragement of a sitting president of the United States. Part of that description could also apply to the 1898 insurrectionists in Wilmington, where white demagogues incited them to violence against Black men and their white allies. Both uprisings erupted after a bitterly contested election. Both descended into violence after impassioned speeches demanding vengeance and retribution. And both were spurred by deep-seated fears and grievances among white men convinced that their very country had been stolen from them. On January 6th, rioters at the Capitol chanted, USA, and take back our country. The white supremacists of 1898 mounted a call and response as they coursed through the streets, searching for Black men to kill. Shouts of, white men, followed by cries of, victory. On January 6th, the mob that invaded the Capitol included white supremacists stoked in part by Trump's depiction of majority Black districts of Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Detroit as cesspools of voter fraud and ballot stuffing. It was a coda to Trump's 4 years of dog whistles to white nationalists that the very face of, quote, their America was becoming Black, brown, and immigrant, the very outsiders who had now helped steal the election. The sight of Confederate flags unfurled inside the Capitol 156 years after the Union survived the Civil War, appalled many Americans. But the Confederate flags carried by white supremacists in 1898 were cheered by a white populace incited to destroy a rare post-Reconstruction model of multiracial cooperation. Wilmington in 1898 was an existential threat to white supremacy. It was perhaps the most racially inclusive city in the South. A coalition of Black voters and white Republicans, the Progressive Party of Lincoln at the time, elected a 10-man city council that included 3 Black men. 10 of the city's 26 police officers were Black. Black men served as justices of the peace, superintendent of streets, county jailer, and county treasurer. All of this galled white North Carolina leaders who proudly called themselves white supremacists. And this inspired them to launch a sophisticated campaign that was designed specifically to prevent Black men from voting or holding public office. White men were told that Black voters and Black public officials had stolen their birthright, the unassailable right to rule over subservient Blacks. White men were further inflamed by false claims spread by white supremacist newspapers that Black men were stalking and raping white women. The leader of the state Democratic Party was Josephus Daniels, who was also the owner of the Raleigh News and Observer. In his paper, Daniels launched a fake news campaign against the Black beast rapists, falsely reporting that, quote, the prevalence of rape by brutal Negroes upon helpless white women has brought about a reign of terror. Daniels' co-conspirator was the Democratic State Party chairman, Furnifold Simmons, who assured white voters, quote, the Negro shall know his place. The N-word appeared regularly in print and was wielded as a weapon by white supremacist politicians in stump speeches. For the 25% of white voters who were illiterate, Daniels published cartoons depicting Black men as vampires, thugs, and rapists. Historian Timothy Snyder has written of Trump, quote, his use of the phrase fake news echoed the Nazi smear Lügenpresse, or lying press. Like the Nazis, he referred to reporters as enemies of the people. Trump's inflammatory rhetoric reached a tipping point after Election Day. He amplified the stolen election lie, providing no evidence of fraud, even as election results were scrutinized and confirmed by Republican state officials and validated nearly 60 times by state and federal judges, many appointed by Trump. This past January 6th, the Capitol insurrectionists failed to overturn the 2020 election. But the 1898 mob mounted America's only lasting violent overthrow of an elected government. After removing the mayor, city council, and police chief at gunpoint, the rioters appointed mob leaders in their place. The coup of 1898 reestablished white supremacy as official city and state policy and ushered in Jim Crow laws that prevented North Carolina's Black citizens from holding public office or voting in significant numbers for the next 60 years. No one was ever held accountable for the murders and coup that took place in Wilmington. The federal government refused to intervene, and North Carolina's state government was taken over by white supremacists who ruled for 6 decades. Josephus Daniels went on to serve as Secretary of the Navy and Ambassador to Mexico. Furnifold Simmons served 3 decades as a U.S. Senator. At least 3 stump speakers from the white supremacy campaign were later elected governors of North Carolina. Some rioters from last week's insurrection have been arrested, and law enforcement authorities have vowed to punish others. But President Trump has not been held accountable for inciting the riot, other than being stripped of his Twitter and Facebook megaphones, and threatened with impeachment, nor have his allies in Congress or the media. But even as more arrests are made, the big lie about a stolen election continues to metastasize on right-wing and white nationalist social media sites, promising yet another violent reckoning. Thanks.
Our next reading is by colleague, the Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel, and she wrote it just before the inauguration. It's a piece called Saving Democracy. She wrote, on January 20th, 2021, our country will change. The new administration coming to DC makes me hopeful and brings me pure joy. Black women in these United States of America live a brilliant, joyful, soul-filled, precious existence. We catch a glimpse of that joy every time Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams smiles. Not a practice for the camera smile, no, a wide smile that reaches their eyes unabashedly, splashing joy onto anyone within range. I've been basking in those joy-filled grins for months because I know it was challenging for them, respectively, to become the first Black woman vice president and to build the Fair Fight organization that toppled Georgia's entrenched political machine. Yes, there's joy in being a woman of color. To be a Black woman in the US is also excruciating. From cradle to casket, our lives are altered by the twin oppressions of sexism and racism. We live with micro attacks and macro aggressions that run through our daily existence unimpeded, like a hot knife through cold butter. In her seminal text, Their Eyes Were Watching God, 1937, Zora Neale Hurston said it much more eloquently than I. Black women are the mules of the world. They carry the load that white men, white women, and Black men refuse to carry. They do the work no one wants to do without praise or thanks. Last fall, we needed to flip 2 Senate seats in Georgia and evict the president. The mules and their siblings, aunties, uncles, children, etc., carried the load and changed the world. They stood in lines, wore masks while campaigning, and sent millions of texts, emails, and tweets. Black queens saved our democracy. We owe them a great deal. As a child, my mother's kitchen had images of MLK and Jesus adorning the walls. I have photos of MLK and Barack Obama in my house. I've added 2 images to my walls, Norman Rockwell's The Problem We All Live With, and the 2020 image created by Bria Goeller of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris striding past the wall where her shadow appears as then 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, who integrated her New Orleans elementary school in 1960. And Stacy's picture is on my altar. They give me joy. I remember how these folks served our country. Cut their pictures out. Stash them in your wallet. They will bring you joy too. I invite you to join me now in the spirit of spoken meditation and prayer. Dear love, abiding and residing in and among us, the sacred ground of our being. We arrive here at this precipice of hope, our hearts renewed, our joy made evident, by our spirits uplifted, no longer weighed by a burden cast off, released and laid down from us. We join our hearts together in great gratitude in this space of momentary respite in the peace that is now. And so let us sit with appreciative silence for the substance of it, breathing together in the quiet of it. We lift up the collective joys and concerns of our beloved community, holding them all in our hearts, offering our blessing of ultimate well-being for all. Love abiding and residing in and among us, infuse us with the fortitude we need in these days to come for the work that lies ahead, as we bring into being our dreaming of the world we'd like to see and our becoming the people we're called to be. Amen, Ashe, and may it be so.
David Zucchino's Wilmington's Lie was published last year. He gave a talk at ERUUF in early February as part of his book tour. At the time, we all recognized that he was lifting up a really important story. And I think it's even more important now because the big lie of white supremacy that ran all throughout Wilmington's story, the story of what happened in Wilmington, also runs throughout all of our history. It's a pattern throughout all of our history, evolving to become the big lie that informs the whole alt-right playbook that we've experienced these last 4 years, culminating in the insurrection of January 6th. What's clear is that when white supremacists go unchecked, they and their harmful practices flourish. What's become more clear every day since January 6th is that truth matters. Lies have the power to brainwash people into believing impossible, dangerous things. We also know from history that there has to be truth-telling so that there can be accountability and consequences before there can be any true healing, before there can be any true lasting peace. We also know that it's possible for us to do this without vengeance and without exclusion. This doesn't harm unity. It's actually the best way to achieve unity, at least a lasting unity. In order to make this work, though, every one of us has to be loyal to something greater than ourselves. In our democracy, it's our Constitution, which is based on long-standing principles. As citizens and elected officials, that's what we're loyal to, instead of, at times, what would be easiest or most beneficial to us personally. And when we discover that the Constitution isn't big enough, it doesn't cover enough of us, we amend it so that it's more inclusive and so that it protects and includes more people. I was so struck by the two different angles, the two different perspectives in the stories told by David Zucchino and Carol Sissel. Both are true stories, and yet they're so different. I think they represent the two competing story streams in America, and you can see those story streams running right through our legal and our political systems. The story that's told by elites to consolidate wealth and power in their own hands, a small circle, contained, controlled. And they tend not to want the Constitution to change. But then there's the story of we the people, which admittedly, it's an imperfect story. It's got some really ugly parts. But it's also the version of our country in which the concept of we consistently increases all the time as people get into good trouble, as John Lewis called it, as they've fought to be included in the story of we, the people. Ruby Bridges was at the center of the fight to make that circle larger. The problem we all live with, the name of the painting that Jacqueline mentioned in Carol's reading, that's Norman Rockwell's painting of that little girl. And it's so often, it just makes me tear up. How could we not want to include that tiny, eager, curious, open, trusting child? The truth of her exclusion, the exclusion of her gifts, her contribution, it is so hurtful. It hurt her. We should know that it hurts all of us. And as ugly as that truth is, we need to face it in order to know it, because it tells us what really matters. Inclusion matters, and some people have long fought for it, which is how as a country we got to the image that you saw at the beginning of today's service of our Vice President Kamala Harris in a power stride, able to march forward because of the shadowed history of Ruby Bridges, the shadows of Vice President Harris's own past and the past of every Black child who had to enter into hard places to integrate our schools and other institutions. And some of you are with us in the congregation this morning. Thank you. Thank you. Unless we're willing to turn to our shadowed past, there will be so many things that we cannot recognize or understand. In part, this is so challenging because racism has been encoded into all of our nation's stories, no matter which stories you tell. And racism has been installed inside every one of us, every one of us. It's kind of like our operating system. And part of the deal is that the people with white privilege in that system are promised that they'll have it if they don't name it and don't challenge it. And it's encoded so deeply, it's like it's just even hard to see it. The people who can often see it are the people who don't have it, which is why we listen to them if we want to take it apart. And then when we talk about dismantling racism or dismantling white supremacy, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about taking apart these things that no one can see, that cause us some of us not to see, not to understand the story that we've always been in together. As much as a crucially important part of anti-racism work has to be about changing policies and changing institutions, another crucial part is dismantling white supremacy that is an inside job. It's so important that we dismantle racism, that the way that we dismantle this racism, it includes becoming conscious of stories that are guiding us and that are shaping our lives. Because when we get conscious, when we start to be able to know and recognize, we're able to choose. And that's when we're able to do the work of together co-creating a new story, one that includes all of us. The people that I admire most are the people who have fought hard to make a larger, more inclusive we in this country. But when I say fight, I mean they show up time after time, decade after decade, in disciplined, principled, non-violent ways. The Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Change offers these 6 key principles. They say, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. It is active nonviolent resistance to evil. Nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. The end result is redemption and reconciliation. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. Nonviolence holds that suffering can educate and transform. Nonviolence chooses love instead of hate, resists violence to the spirit as well as to the body, is active, not passive, does not sink to the level of the hater, restores community, resists injustice. Nonviolence recognizes that all life is interrelated. Nonviolence believes that the universe is on the side of justice. The nonviolent resistor has deep faith that justice eventually will win. So think for a minute about the people that you admire most. And I'll bet who comes to mind are people who have taken the high road through the struggle for civil and human rights. I think of the people that we most admire as Unitarian Universalists, all the inspiring people that we've included in our hymnal, this book here. This is sort of like our prayer book and our playbook combined. We've got Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Jr., Dorte Zola and the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa and Gandhi, Black Elk and Buddha, Jesus and Emma Goldman, the Hebrew prophets, and Henry David Thoreau. And when we update this collection, you can bet that John Lewis and Stacey Abrams and Amanda Gorman are going to be included. You could put together some very weird combo packs of historical figures out of this book, but they would all share something in common. They would share a commitment to a shared set of values, core values, and they would include honesty, equity, justice, respect, courage, humility, openness, transparency, inclusion, compassion, empathy, openness, I said that, curiosity, generosity, strength, gratitude. And they would all recognize healthy limits and the need for accountability. Not everything goes. And you would notice that none of them are vengeful. That while they all recognize the need to restrain violence and harm to others, their goals are redemption and reconciliation, not retribution. Some of these values are universals that are shared by ethical and spiritual people everywhere, and some are unique to religious liberals. Still, we who are religious liberals know, just like all other religious people know, that we need to begin by cultivating these qualities within ourselves. And then we need to bring these qualities and our values to a shared public common life. We cultivate these values in ourselves because democracy depends on citizens with the inner strength to tolerate differences, who are able to cobble together compromises that include each other's values. This month at ERUUF, we've offered a project of 30 Days of Love for Democracy, either in a Facebook group or a daily email. So every day there's a quote, there's a spiritual practice, a way to practice that spiritual quality, and then a question about democracy to reflect on by yourself or with others, and ideas for how to take action. It's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming, and we never envisioned or even intended that anyone would do every single thing. And honestly, until January 20th, who had any free brain cells to pay any attention to anything more than their newsfeed and just getting through the day, right? So the invitation has been to take the parts of this that speak to you and just work with that. Just pick one, work with that as you're able. We created this, though, because all of us need to take our values and our democracy seriously. Unitarian Universalists value the search for truth and meaning. It's one of our 7 principles. We believe that it's critically important to figure out what we each believe. What is it that we each hold is ultimately real, ultimately true? Because without grounding in that truth, there is no trust. And without trust, there is no community. And community is essential because it would be daunting, if not impossible, if we had to figure this out without other people. We just can't do it by ourselves. And those people around us include our ancestors, and it includes the wisdom that they've left us in stories and art and scripture, all the good things. Unitarian Universalists also value the use of the democratic process because the freedom to make ethical and moral choices is our spiritual and our human birthright. The free, open spaces within ourselves and within our communities are among the best places to encounter the sacred. Whatever for us is ultimately real and ultimately true. And so we need also open, free public spaces in order to be able to make the choices together that enable us to co-create goodness with the sacred. And democracy, as flawed a system as it is, it's the best system we've ever found to do this. And over time, we've discovered that the more we open up our democracy to include more people, the better it becomes for everyone. Our values are not just something that we cherish and think about. They guide us. They become practices and actions by which we interact with other people and the world. Our values become the ways that we create our lives, and the ways that we make spaces that shelter and protect ourselves and the people and the important things that we love. So when we fight for our values, we are fighting for our lives. And since what we do is what will become, it's key that we engage in this struggle in nonviolent ways. We can't destroy ourselves in the process. It's self-preservation to do this nonviolently. It is crucial for Unitarian Universalists, just as it is for everyone else, to know what is ultimate and greater than just ourselves. This can be love, This can be truth. It can be the future. It can be God. Anything big enough that we trust to guide our critical questions and our critical decision making. This is what we need to be loyal to. And whatever we put in place for a government or a constitution, these created structures have to be based on the ultimate guiding principles that together we have agreed on. If a relative few career government officials of both parties had not taken tough stands recently, based on their loyalty to the principles of the Constitution, instead of the harmful, illegal demands of the last president over the last weeks of his term, we would be in a very different situation this morning. Our values and what we are loyal to matters. We all know our country is in one hot mess right now. And our country needs every single one of us to bring our very best self and our most loving capabilities to help rebuild the common good. We can't just sit back and leave this up to our leaders. We all have to participate, starting with our friends and neighbors, our coworkers, our colleagues. We do not have to go far to begin, friends. We can start in the very next Zoom meeting that we go to. The catch is we can't do this solely in the ways we already know, because that's how we got here. What we have to do is we have to figure out some new ways that we can add to what we know about how to act and how to be together. The good news is that innovation actually comes out of our ability to abrade ideas. And as long as we stick to chafing ideas and not each other, we'll start to figure out these new things. That's a key piece. We abrade ideas, not each other. Senator George McGovern said, "The highest patriotism is not a blind acceptance of official policy, but a love of one's country deep enough to call us, all of us, to a higher plane." This sometimes takes courage. Courage is elevated. There is something sacred in it. At the same time, courage is also very near. Courage comes from our heart, our ability to think and to act with love. It's a good place to begin to sort out a hot mess, because we grow in courage every time we choose love. The more we engage this process, the more love is created for ourselves, for others, for the world. There are miles to go, friends, but principled love is the best beginning we could possibly have. And the good news is, none of us is alone. Amen. Blessed be. Whew. It's a lot to take in, a lot to get your mind and your heart around. And that's the work. We're going to take a moment to listen to another piece by Kate Lewis. That's what happens when Kate listens deeply within herself. She hears something true and it comes out as music. How does your truth come out? We'll listen to this piece as we consider our gifts, our time, our talent, and our treasure. If you would like to make a donation, give a gift to ERUUF, you can do so with the information that will be in the chat box at this time. There are secure links on our website, or you could send a check if you prefer. never turning back. I do believe we shall overcome. We shall overcome hate. We shall overcome fear. We will live in love together, inclusively. For all that weaves together the fabric of this beloved community, we give thanks. So we're going to sing again together. This last hymn is For This We Stand. Pam will lead us. The words will be on your screen.
For this we stand, all peoples of the earth, in spirit as in law, across the sacred land, all worth and dignity bestowed to each as right of birth, our lives in interdependence. For this we stand. For this we stand, one human family, evolving tapestry spun of a single strand of earth and water, born this harvest of diversity, one flame of life bright within us. For this we stand. For this we stand, mysterious unity, integrity as from the single artist's hand, our humble step informed by wisdom of the centuries, our every breath gift of spirit. For this we stand.
Today's closing words are by Amanda Gorman once again, as we continue on with The Hill We Climb. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-lined hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation. In every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful.
When day comes, we step out of the shade aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Amen.
That's the truth, friends. That's the truth, and it deserves an amen. Blessed be, go in love, go in truth, go be the power of love.